Welcome to my third Xcode tutorial. In this tutorial I will be explaining how to get the text from a UI text field and display it into a UI label. We will be using the enter key, in other words the return button on the bottom right of your keyboard, and we will be also using a button to submit it. So let's go on and create a new Xcode project. I will just name mine Xcode tutorial 3 and save it into my folder. So we will start by going to the main.storyboard. This is where we can design our view. We won't really be designing anything today. We will just be putting a UI text field into up here and just putting a label on under it so we can display it there, and we will also need a button for submission. So I forgot to tell you this before, but you may have to change the size of your view controller. I am designing it for an iPhone 6, so yes, and as you see there are big changes in an iPhone 6 screen and the default screen, so do change it if you need to. I'll name the button we placed submit, and we shall just leave the label with the text label. So let's go into our view controller.h. We will be declaring our variables here. So to start with, put two curly brackets. We are ready to start creating the objects or the interference labels for the items. So to access one of these labels, buttons and other similar objects, we have to create an IB outlet by typing IB outlet. Then we have to give the type of the IB outlet what we want it to be. So for example, for our UI text field, we would like it to be a text field, obviously. So UI text field and an asterisk, and then we have to type the name of it. I will just name it text in for text input, and then you have to make the same thing for the UI text for the UI label, which I will name label, and also for the UI button. For the UI button, we will also have to create an action, because the UI button IB outlet is only for setting its name and its design, or hiding it and showing it. We'll go into that in later tutorials. So to create an IB action, we go out of the curly brackets, we put a dash, a normal bracket, and then we type IB action. After that, we put the name we want it to be. I will just label it button pressed, and you can just delete the ID and the sender. We wouldn't need that now. So we are ready to start coding, but just before, we have to match the IB outlets and the actions up with our object. So to do that, we click this little home button icon that if you hover over it will write view controller, and we click on the show connection inspector, and we choose text in, which we wanted our text field to be, so we just drag it over from that little dot into our text field, and just make sure that you go back. Then for the label, we chose our label. For the button is our submit button, and as you can see down here are the actions. We also have to link that to the submit button, and you can just choose what you want. Did on exit is you press it, and if something happens after it exits or executes itself. Editing changed and all these others, we won't need them. I have never used them. I've only used touch up inside, because that's basically immediately as you touch it, the button itself, it will execute. So now we are ready to move on to the viewController.m, but just before we do so, we have to go back to the viewController.h because I forgot to make a variable. I forgot to make an ns string, which will be used for storing what we read and then put onto the label. So by how to make an NX string is my previous tutorial, but I will just quickly go through it. So you write an NX string, then an asterisk, and then you name it what you want. I will just name it text input, and we are ready to go into the viewController.m. So in the viewController.m, we will only have to write a new function, and we will also have to make a function for the action of the button pressed. So we will start with doing the action because it's a little bit simpler. So to check the action, or if it has executed, you put a dash, a normal dash, then you type IB action, and just go back to check what we named it. We named it button pressed, so you go button pressed, it will pop up, and you have to do the curly brackets to start writing the code inside. So what do we want it to do when we press the button? We want to get the text from what is inside the UI text field, and we do that by getting the text field's name, which is text in, and putting a dot and writing text. It's really simple. And before this, you have to write text. You have to write the variable you want to put it in. So I want to put it in text input, and you just make an equal mark, and you're ready to go. Never forget that the variable that you want to place the value in always has to go before the equation mark, and the one that you want to place into it has to go to the right of the equation mark. So now we have got the text input. So the text input, the NS string, is equal to what is in the text box. Now we have to put it onto the label. We do that by writing the name of the label, which is text. No, it's not text, it is label. And we write label dot text equals, since this is the one we are placing it into, text input. And this is all the code we need to run it through. If this doesn't work for you for any reason, you can just put a quick check and an ns log and an @ mark and 2 quotation marks and type, say, test button pressed. This will just pop up here on the bottom in a window, which it will write out test button pressed to check if it actually has executed. So let's try now running it. I'm running it on an iPhone 6, which you can adjust up here. So let's wait until it runs. So as you see, it did show up, and just scroll down to type in. So say we want it to say ELE. So, and we press submit, and as you see, the NS log has popped that up down here, and the label has also changed to ELE or LE. So our next step is to do the same thing, but if you press the return button down here. Because if now you press the return button, it doesn't change, as you see, because now it's EKE, not ELE, and it didn't change. So to do that, we will have to use the delegate of the text field. We do that by, it's a Boolean function, so it's a true or false function, but we can all integrate this small amount of code into it, so it will change our label. So we do that by typing bool text field should return, then we do a double dot, then UI text field space asterisk text field, and we do the curly brackets, and then here we have to write text field in square brackets, text square brackets, not curly brackets, square brackets, text field resign first responder, and just as usual put the semicolon at the end, and here we can just copy and paste the same code into it. Now the only thing left is to put the return, as you always have to do for a function, and because this is a bool function, we can return either yes or no, but we won't be using this, so it doesn't matter. I will just return no. So let me explain what this actually does. So it constantly is checking if the text field return is pressed. If it is pressed, then it runs the text field resign first responder, which is basically the response of this executing, and it just has to control that. It's only you just have to write it. You just have to remember writing it, else it may not work. So then we just do the same thing, put the value of the text in text field into the text input and a string, and then replace the text input and a string onto the label. I have read over the code, and there's a few more things we should change. So spelling mistakes mostly. So this is field, make sure that you change that. I already changed it, but this is field and this is return, not return. So you may have already realized that while I was making the tutorial. Just make sure that you change that, else it won't work. So that's the first thing that we have to change. The second one that we can do is put the nslog into this function, so we just make sure that it runs correctly. So return pressed, and there's one really important thing we have to do. It is to link the delegate of the text field to the view controller. This is really important, because if we don't, then it won't work. This is because this text field should return function is a self function, so it does the action to itself, so you always have to link the delegate. You do that by clicking on the text field in your main.storyboard, going into this little right arrow and clicking on this little plus button. It may be hidden, so just click show on the top right hand corner. So you click delegate, the plus button, and you just drag it up here into this little icon. It will write out view controller the same way. I can just redo it just to make sure that you see it. So as you see it, this is what will happen, and now we should be ready to go. There are a few things that you can edit. You can resize the text field and the label, so you can write out longer pressed. You can also change the submit buttons, fonts, and everything in this little downwards arrow with a slide bar, and just play with it. You can do a lot of things with Xcode without actually coding. So there's one more thing that may be useful for you. So in the super view did load, we can empty the label, so nothing will be written on it when we load it up, because now if we load it up there will be label written into it. We can do that by taking the name of the label, which is label, then putting text label dot text and making it empty by putting nothing into it. You can do that by an @ sign and 2 quotation marks. Quotation marks mean double quotation marks mean a string, and single quotation marks mean a char, which is 1 character. So let's run it and see what will happen. So as you see, we can type anything into it, press return, and it will show up. And if you change the text, say, and you press the submit, it will change it again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you for watching.